Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. What is a doubly exciting day at Notre Dame. Today we will celebrate the university's entry into the Association of American Universities, an association of the most distinguished research universities in North America, and engage in a discussion of the recently issued University Strategic Framework. We are honored to be joined by Barbara Snyder, the president of the AAU, and by Peter Lang, the distinguished former provost at Duke University. I will give these guests a fuller and more formal introduction, but let me begin with a few remarks. I am entering my 19th year as president of Notre Dame, and among the most memorable days in those 19 years will always be May 25th of this year, when I took a previously scheduled call from Barbara Snyder. I had been working with President Snyder and some AAU presidents and lobbying members of Congress on the most unfortunate endowment tax, a tax on endowment earnings of America's most distinguished colleges and universities. I assumed the scheduled call would be about that effort. When Barbara explained that she was calling to extend to Notre Dame an invitation to join the AAU, I was as stunned as I was joyful. I tried to keep my professional composure. I'm not sure how successful I was. Scripture says, "Blessed on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings good news." I'll always think of Barbara when I hear that line. Membership in the AAU will bring Notre Dame practical benefits, allowing us to join annual meetings of presidents, provosts, vice presidents for research, and other academic leaders of the world's best research universities. We will no doubt gain much from those meetings. We will also have access to valuable data collected and studies done by the AAU to help us assess our progress and assist us in our decisions. Aside from these practical benefits, the AAU's invitation is a recognition by the world's most distinguished association of research universities of the progress Notre Dame has made in recent decades. Notre Dame's academic reputation has long been associated with a superb undergraduate education, but in recent years, a great deal of time, effort, and resources have gone into enhancing our research. The AAU's invitation is a recognition of the progress we have made. The recognition and the measures that led to it reflect well, certainly, upon the University of Notre Dame as a whole. There is no group, however, on whom it reflects more brilliantly than on you, the faculty of Notre Dame. You generated the ideas. You conducted the experiments. You led the research teams. You wrote the books and articles that earned this recognition. Often this work was done at real sacrifice. Always it reflected a passion for knowledge characteristic of all great universities. Our celebration of Notre Dame's membership in the AAU is above all a celebration of you and your accomplishments. If you remember nothing else of what is said today, please remember this. I congratulate you and thank you, faculty at the University of Notre Dame, on behalf of the whole university, for earning this recognition. Now, the AAU is assiduously and appropriately guarded about the deliberations that led to invitations to new members. We will not press Barbara to reveal information this afternoon. However, I cannot but believe that what caught the membership committee's collective eye was not simply the measures of research and activity at present at Notre Dame, but the rate of growth in activity in recent years. From the data we can access, over the past 15 years, Notre Dame's trajectory in key measures is among the most steeply positive of all R1 research universities. We are proud of that record, but we cannot be complacent. An institution recognized for the steep upward line tracking its research will look far less impressive if that line plateaus or declines. We must sustain and even enhance the work of recent years. Moreover, as a faith-based institution, we have an opportunity to make a particular contribution to the world of university research. We are the only explicitly religious institution in the AAU. Of all the influences in our world today, few are more pervasive than religious faith and the traditions that shape it. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has noted, while science, technology, democratic nation states, and the market have enormous impacts on our collective lives, none is able to answer three critical questions every human being will ask at some time in his or her life. Who am I? Why am I here? And how then shall I live? Much of the world's population finds answers to these questions in their faith. Yet religious faith can sometimes exist separate from and even antagonistic to the world of reason, inquiry, and discovery. Notre Dame's distinctive mission and special contribution is to bring faith into dialogue with inquiries across the disciplines in order to engage the great questions and challenges of our time. Universities first emerged 800 years ago in the Catholic culture of Europe, and prominent in their raison d'etre was to foster a dialogue between faith and the very best of secular learning. Notre Dame will continue that tradition effectively only if its research is truly superb and it fosters a dialogue between faith and reason appropriate for our time. We believe in the words of the framework that, quote, "This effort to educate students and conduct research at the highest level animated by a distinctive Catholic mission is one of the most exciting and consequential experiments in global education," unquote. With that, we come to the second theme for today's convocation, the university's strategic framework. In conjunction with the plans of the colleges, schools, divisions, institutes, and other units, the framework sets the course for Notre Dame's continued progress in the next decade. We hope and believe that it will usher in a decade of progress every bit as impressive as recent decades. This framework is the result of several years of work by people across the university. I thank all the faculty who have submitted proposals for a Moment to See, Courage to Act initiative. I also thank everyone who served on one of our 9 theme advisory committees, 7 led by faculty and 2 by staff. You put a great deal of time and produced valuable reports. I thank the deans, department chairs, and leaders of institutes and centers who contributed so much to this process. I thank David Bailey and his team in institutional research, innovation, and strategy for shepherding the process so expertly. And I thank Provost John McGreevy, who drafted the final document. In an oft-quoted line, Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is indispensable." The point of that ironic claim is that plans, once completed, are almost immediately obsolete. Circumstances change, unanticipated obstacles emerge, and new opportunities arise. Rigid adherence to a plan is more a detriment to real progress than an asset. Nevertheless, the planning process we have undertaken identifies priorities, themes, and initiatives that will give overall direction to our efforts. You will have seen that we organize this plan around 3 ideas: identifying vital areas where we are already strong and might become preeminent, the meaning for Notre Dame of a multicultural, multilingual multilingual Catholic church now anchored demographically in the global south, and a renewed emphasis on science and engineering to serve a world in need. Once formulated, the plan orients and organizes our efforts. Yet, after its formulation, the planning process continues as we gather new information, monitor changing circumstances, seize on emergent opportunities, develop more creative strategies, and always adapt. All this is why we have entitled what we have issued a strategic framework rather than a plan. We recognize that more specific plans will need to be fleshed out, and for this, thought and discussion must continue. We are here today to engage in such thought and discussion with two of the most respected and accomplished leaders in American higher education, who I will now ask to join me on the stage while I briefly introduce them. So Barbara and Peter and John, would you join me up here, please? I am told that our first guest, Barbara R. Snyder, insists on brief introductions, and she will get one. She currently serves as the president of the Association of American Universities, which represents the 71 leading research universities in the United States and Canada, and of which Notre Dame is now a proud member. Before her role at the AAU, she served as the president of Case Western Reserve University and as executive vice president and provost of the Ohio State University. She earned her bachelor's degree from OSU and her law degree from the University of Chicago School of Law, where she served as executive editor of the Law Review. Peter Lang served as Duke University's provost for 15 years. Working closely with two presidents, he oversaw strategic, programmatic, budgetary, and administrative decision-making for Duke's non-medical schools and institutes. During his tenure, Duke executed a sophisticated strategy that combined planning with targeted financial support and deliberate culture change. Peter is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the recipient of the 2014 American Association of University Administrators Eileen Tosny Award for career service in higher education. He earned his BS from Oberlin College and his PhD in political science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Our colleague, Provost John McGreevy, will moderate our discussion. And John, I turn it over to you.
Okay, a real round of applause for our distinguished guests. We have, I'm looking at the clock, exactly 42 minutes to have a conversation here. It will be a conversation informed by, and I thank you for, the many questions faculty colleagues sent in response to our initial email. So I thank those colleagues for those questions, and we'll have a conversation where we think through those questions and then go beyond. First question, Barbara, Peter, there are many challenges facing higher education. We could make a long list. The need for universities to support democracy, the need to become more diverse and inclusive, the need for universities to become better agents of social mobility. From where you sit, what do you think is the single biggest challenge facing research universities like Notre Dame? Barbara.
Public trust.
Public trust. Tell us about that.
I think it is, so much flows from that. There's, as you know, so much in our political life right now that has these threads of populism, and that also causes a sort of an anti-expertise, anti-intellectual, anti-elitist way of thinking about things that has been difficult for our universities. And I think there's also, married with that, this challenge about our value proposition. And some of that has been driven by these reports of these massive increases in tuition far beyond in the sticker price of tuition, I should say, far beyond the cost of inflation. And that has led to a thinking about us that I think is not really fair. And there also is a better story there, because if you look at net price, actually the story is far different. But there are a lot of negative consequences to the diminution in public trust that we see for public universities in terms of the public support for those institutions, but also in public trust of, we just saw it during the pandemic, in public trust of science, and the consequences for the lack of public trust in data, in facts, in science. They are profound, and they're profoundly negative, and they have many consequences for our universities as well.
What would you do about it? I mean, you're the president of the American Association of American Universities. What do we do about this decline in public trust?
So we are working on that.
Yeah.
And one of the things we learned during the pandemic, despite the concern about public trust, our experts were, you saw it, they were on television every day, because people were craving expert advice. When something is hard, what do we do? And this was an opportunity for us, so we ran a little campaign on behalf of AAU featuring stories from our universities, our member institutions, now including Notre Dame, about how they were dealing with it. Some of them were on the science, that things that you might expect around the ways that they were working to protect the public. But some of them were in the humanities and social sciences too, about the way we've learned some of the things that we have learned painfully from the pandemic. And so we are in the business of education too, but our education is not to students. Our education is to, of course, policymakers, members of Congress, and other policymakers, and also to members of the public. Because if we don't reach them, if we don't educate them about the value proposition, about the public good of higher education, it has become seen too much as a private good, and that's a whole nother problem, but about the public good that we do both through our research and through our education, we are failing our society, our country, and we are not serving all of our members too. So we're actively involved in trying to make that better.
Excellent. Peter, is your answer the same? Public trust?
So let me just say, for 15 years as provost, I always spoke after the president. And speaking after the president has one fundamental problem. If you agree with the president, you don't have anything left to say. So that's the position I find myself in today, because after Barbara has spoken, I do agree with everything she said. I would add, however, because that's the other trick you learn.
You have to add.
You have to find, I would add, however, that I think the other great challenge, which is in a way less on the surface, but perhaps deeper, is what's running through our society is the challenge to knowledge and wisdom and expertise. After all, universities seek to develop that in their students. They seek to promote it through their research, and they see their research as being a valuable contribution. And when the society begins to question the role of expertise and the role of knowledge, then we are placed in a very, very difficult position. We become vulnerable to attacks which are well outside of our normal way of approaching the world. And they undercut the ability of our faculty and of our students fundamentally to make contributions to society. So I think that you called it a populist trend, and it is a populist trend, but it is a very dangerous one, both for universities and for the society more generally.
Okay, excellent. You both had a chance to read the strategic framework. You heard Father Jenkins say I was involved in writing it, so this is a very personal question for me. Give me your reaction to the framework, pro or con, honestly. And more broadly, what distinct role should Notre Dame play in the world of research universities? Every university has a particular mission. Give us your thoughts as in a sense, outsiders to Notre Dame, what you think our role is. Maybe start with you.
Fair to let Peter go first.
Peter goes first. Peter goes first.
Thank you. Well, let me take the second part of the question first, okay? Which is Notre Dame enters this period with a very, very distinct advantage. which is its Catholic tradition and its grounding in that tradition. It makes it distinctive in the world of higher education, really, to a considerable degree.
And
Certainly,
why is that an advantage?
it is an advantage because it is something that you hold that others do not. Now, as Father Jenkins was saying, bringing that to bear on the actual activities and strategy of the university is really the critical factor over this strategic plan. I love the strategic plan. I think it's extremely good, and we'll talk later about things that need to be done to implement it, et cetera. But I think that finding the key so that you can bring that broad Catholic tradition, not a narrow one, but a broad Catholic tradition, to bear on the activities and the teaching and learning and research of the university in a way that makes Notre Dame both distinguished and distinctive is critical to its success.
Excellent. Barbara?
And I agree with everything Peter said. And I especially appreciated two things about the strategic framework. One was that you made what is always difficult decision to make some choices. It's so hard because every department is so important to the whole of the institution. But if you're going to focus, you have to make some choices about where you're going to do that. And you have the courage to do that. And I know how hard it is in the context of an institution. Every faculty member is passionate about the discipline in which that faculty member works. I understand that. And every faculty member is contributing to the whole of the institution. But you have to make choices because resources are limited, and I appreciated that. And I also think the candor with which you address the current state of affairs was, well, I don't want to say unique because I don't want to suggest that no one else has ever done it, but I think it's pretty rare in strategic framework sorts of documents for institutions to be that candid about where they stand currently.
Right. Weaknesses would be a tougher word there.
Exactly.
Potential challenges and
About
weaknesses.
weaknesses.
Peter, you're nodding. You agree with that?
I do agree with that, and I think that you have identified some areas where you can really develop. I found the plan making choices in a very subtle and positive way, but there are choices in there. I went through my little yellow liner, and I said, okay, that's what I'm looking for, is where they're making the choices, not where they're telling us what we already know, but where are they making the choices? Where are they willing to say we're going to do X and not do Y? You don't say many nots, you
Correct.
just say the X's, but that's going to be critical going forward in terms of the resources you expend, and resources here, I mean, in a very broad way. Leadership, money, time, intellectual attention.
Go ahead, please.
Let me put a challenge out there. One of the most interesting things about this document, and one of the things that I applaud, is the emphasis on interdisciplinarity. Those of us in leadership roles in the academy, we've been talking about that for years. I mean, decades, truly. But we have talked the talk a lot more than we have walked the walk. And so making choices in that regard, and so the challenge now is I'm going to be watching to see how well you do this, because I think a lot of other institutions talk a lot about the benefits of interdisciplinarity. We see it all over the place, but actually being able to pull off that challenge, which is a challenge because we're so used to this system of departments and schools and colleges, and there is so much structure around that trying to work past those lines will be a challenge, and I look forward to watching how you do that. So that's my challenge.
That was probably the most distinctive thing we did under my period at Duke, and it is a profound culture change.
Tell us about the culture change. We've referred to it in the framework as thinking as an institution.
Right. Well, it starts at the level of the types of hires you make and the places that share in those hires. It starts with the resources that you have as a provost to work with your deans and work with your chairs to find places of collaboration. And it's slow. You bring a few people, they're striking, their colleagues recognize how good they are and how much they're contributing. They say, wow, that worked better than I expected, or even though he's spending some of his time doing service in another department, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah. And he's bringing in great graduate students, and it slowly spreads. It takes a decade to make that kind of cultural change, but it needs to be not just what you say, but the structures you build that reinforce it.
Okay, excellent, and thank you both. Peter, based on your experience at Duke, think a little bit more about the general question of how do you implement a strategic plan? Pitfalls, opportunities, the worst possible outcome, I think everyone agrees, would be a plan that sits on a shelf that really doesn't get referred to except once a year in a letter from the president or something like that. How do we make such a plan real?
Okay, well, it starts with being redundant. That's the only thing I can say. It starts with saying the same thing over and over, hammering on the principles of the plan. It has to be a team effort. It has to go from the provost to the deans to the faculty to the staff. And you'd be surprised how many things hang on the ability of the staff to implement even at the bureaucratic level, the things that are enabling or disabling for the kinds of things that you're trying to accomplish.
Think about there are a lot of hugely talented staff leaders in this room. What would you say to them?
Get on board. I mean,
Well,
but I'll give you an example. I'll give you all right, we were really pushing international. Yeah. Okay, so the issue arose, how do you pay faculty that are not on site and maybe not in the United States? So we go to the payroll office and they say, oh, we don't know, we don't know how to do that. Okay, so we had to basically change the leadership in that payroll office to enable us to be able to pay and therefore to be able to actually implement the international commitments that we were making to faculty. Okay, so it has to run all the way through the system. That would be one thing. The second thing is the crucial thing of collaborative leadership. When I say it has to be a team effort, that doesn't just mean everybody has to participate, but everybody has to be brought into the discussion. There has to be a lot of transparency, a lot more than a lot of institutions are used to. I can't begin to tell you the number of meetings. People would say, like, oh man, another meeting. But actually those meetings are important because they build a shared understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And without that, people get in the way of other people. So that's the second thing. A combination of central framing. This is what you're doing. You have central framing, but the initiative has to sit with the faculty for the specific initiatives. They have to be within that frame, and if they're outside, they don't get the support that you're going to give to the things which are within the frame. But within the frame, the initiative has to come from the faculty, and in certain areas, even from the students and the staff. Yeah. Because that's where the real vitality comes from. That's where the real energy comes from. And then you need a strategic understanding of what your real resource envelope is. You can promise too much, and in promising too much, you end up doing too little. You have to have a sense of the resource envelope, by which I mean dollars. I mean the leadership. If there isn't a leader for an initiative you want to take, it's not worth doing it. It'll be money down the drain. It revolves around ideas, and it evolves around people. And you have to bring them all together in order for the plan to succeed.
Excellent, thank you. Barbara, before Notre Dame was in the AAU, we thought the admissions criteria for the AAU were deeply unjust. Now that we're in the AAU, we applaud those criteria and hope that no one else is ever admitted. More seriously, what is the significance of being in the AAU? We're the same institution we were on May 24th, in a sense, as opposed to May 26th, when you called us on May 25th. From your point of view, what do you see as the significance of Notre Dame's admission to the AAU? And I'll add one other piece of it. It probably is significant, as Father Jenkins said, that we're the only very explicitly religious university in the AAU. So maybe both questions.
Well, Notre Dame's invitation to join the AAU is, as Father Jenkins said, really a recognition of the great work that's being done here by faculty and by staff who help contribute to the research mission, because we know research doesn't just get done by faculty. It takes a lot of people to do that, and students contribute to the research work. But it is largely, as he suggested, a faculty-driven effort, and it is a recognition of that. But it is also a bet on the future. So we don't take members that we think are not likely to endure in the AAU over a very long period of time. And if you look at our history, you'll see that that's true. So it's also a bet on what you're going to be doing in the future. So that trajectory that Father Jenkins mentioned is certainly a piece of that. And we don't consider whether an institution is or is not religiously affiliated. And certainly we have a number of institutions historically that had religious affiliations, as a number of our institutions did many years ago. And I guess I would also note that although it's non-sectarian, we have Brandeis, which is very directly tied to the Jewish community and to Judaism and Jewish values. If you look on their website, you will see that. So it's not completely unusual to have that. But I do think that given the power of Catholicism globally, and especially in the parts of the world developing now where our opportunities for providing solutions through research are tremendous, I mean, almost limitless, and the need is so great. I think there's a real opportunity to marry those values and the power of that platform that you have. And the other thing I would note is when I talked about public trust being a challenge, Notre Dame has a particularly high ranking in the public trust ranking, if you will. Now, we also find that it's a little bit like members of Congress. You know, Congress is among the lowest if you look at institutions in terms of the ranking of public trust. They rank very, very low. People do not trust Congress, but they trust their member of Congress. So there is a little bit of that too with our members. We see that although they generally don't say good things about higher education, they feel better about America's leading research universities, and they feel even better about the leading research university that's in their community.
Interesting.
So you have an opportunity both globally and nationally because you're Notre Dame and of your unique position, but also with regard to your standing in this community, because each one of our members lives in the community in which they exist. And it's important to take that into account when we think about these lofty things and solving these global problems, and that's really important. But we also live in communities. We're part of a place. And it's important to think about that as well as you think about the future of Notre Dame and how it builds trust.
Thank you. Okay, here's a tough question that was written in unsolicited from a Board of Trustee member who somehow got the email. And this Board of Trustee member said, it was written directly to me, okay, John, congratulations on the strategic framework, but here's the thing. I see that the number of faculty has increased at Notre Dame significantly in the last 20 years. How do you know that the faculty's gotten better? And I wrote back and said, well, listen, we have a lot of measures to assess the quality of our faculty. We're very proud of our faculty. And then this person wrote back and said, this is the awkward part of the question, yeah, but how do you know it's going to get better in the future? How are you going to build a faculty that 20 years from now will be even stronger than the very strong faculty that's in this room? So how would you answer that question? I have not responded to the email yet.
This is actually simple, because you ask your faculty to hire new faculty who are better than they are. And that's how
simple?
you improve.
You think that's simple?
I'm just saying.
What?
We had a rule for appointments, promotions, and tenure committee. We had a rule that the department had to demonstrate that the faculty member hired would improve the average quality of the department. And it was a rule which we strictly enforced. which of course didn't really require much enforcement because once people know it's the rule and know it's going to be enforced, they apply it to themselves at a much earlier stage in the hiring process. And the other thing we didn't do is we looked very, very skeptically at appointments which were being made to faculty members who were the second, our first guy didn't take the job, so we went to number 2. We would look much harder at number 2 than we would at number 1. And if we didn't like number 2, we were willing to say no, but we always told them, then you get the search back.
Yeah.
All right, because that was absolutely critical to departments making demands on themselves to assure the quality of appointments.
Okay.
So while I said it was simple, the solution was simple, it is in one way because it's simple to say, but as I heard somebody say, but it's hard to do. Yes, in practice, it is hard to do, but it is the way to improve faculty. And if your faculty size is not going to increase, as we were talking about earlier, you have 2 avenues. One is in the new faculty you hire, because there always will be turnover. You are making bets on the future. You hire these brilliant, young faculty members and hope that they turn out to be brilliant and that they are loyal because they got their start at Notre Dame, so they end up staying and winning their Nobel Prize right here. And the other opportunity is when you have it to hire laterally people who have already demonstrated great research accomplishment. That is harder because it's hard to get people to move and costs more to do that than making a bet on young people, but produces results in the shorter term.
But that's hard and harder, but hardest is the tenure decisions within the departments.
That's right.
Having the departments hold themselves to a standard, the same standard, so that they make the decisions at the point of tenuring a person, that they are tenuring for the future and for their expectations about the person for the future, and not just
So
on
it's
their
not so
past
much the
accomplishments.
provost or the dean or the president, it is the departments themselves or the schools.
Well, if it ends up being the provost, the system's actually failed. Okay, we always used to say, if people would say, well, you're tenuring 90% of the people that come to the APT committee. I said, yeah, that's because the departments are making decisions and the deans are making the decisions and they're making the good decisions. Therefore, they're not leaving much for the provost committee to decide, except occasionally when departments would just, and deans would pass the buck. I mean, literally, that's what they were doing, and we would have to decide. But the provost's job is to pass those standards down and work with her or his deans and faculty to assure that they are doing, because they have the knowledge that can really apply those standards.
Okay. 2 faculty members, one from Mendoza, one from engineering, wrote in and basically asked this question. We're in the world at Notre Dame of big-time sports. And that has become a very complex and confusing world. Name, image, likeness agreements, transfer portal, shifting conferences which affect Duke and affect Notre Dame. How do we get out of this world or make a difference in this world with Notre Dame in a leadership capacity? Sports are important here. And in the last generation, one of the biggest changes at Notre Dame has been the success of women's sports. But the entire landscape is really quite different than it was 5 years ago. Does this come to the AAU as a topic?
Actually, we do occasionally talk about athletics because it is important in different ways to all of our members, one way and another. And the challenge with college sports is to try to do it, I think, in the right way, where student athletes are truly student athletes, and they are students. And that gets to be difficult with things like one and done and opportunities to turn pro. Most of the student athletes, even at the best Division I schools, will not have a pro career. Most of them will not. And therefore, what they do in school is far more important. But of course, everyone thinks that I will be that exceptional case. I will make it to the NFL, the NBA, you name it. the beauty of sports where the student athlete is really at the center and getting the degree, getting the education is a big part of that. I think it's really important. And I think student athletes play a great leadership role on college campuses today, not just because the convening power that you all derive from bringing people together around a big football game, but also the role that student athletes play. They are juggling a lot of different things on campus. And I've always admired the way student athletes can manage to juggle a very intense practice schedule, competing at a very high level, and still be able to keep up with their coursework. Interestingly, when I was chair of the athletic council, when I was a faculty member at Ohio State, we looked at this, and students who were in season did better overall academically than students who were out of season. So the rigor and the routine of that can be really good. And I think it's really important to recognize the contributions they make. Also, they are in so many ways the face of the institution to the community. So I hope they all recognize that. I'm sure they do here. And they have a really great opportunity to serve in a way that not every student has, at least publicly.
Now, you understand I would have answered this question differently before last night.
George,
Okay.
just for the record, Duke beat Clemson in football last night.
Yeah,
okay?
I gather a lot of people got it. But I think Barbara's absolutely right. The commitment to the student athlete, is absolutely essential, which means that the coaches have to be committed to that view. And one of the things that I deeply believe in is that the academic leadership of the university has to know and work with the athletic leadership of the university. If the athletic department wanders off into its own completely autonomous world, then you really run the risk that that bond of the student athlete gets broken, and it becomes the athlete who also happens to show up every once in a while in class. Now, the changes that you mentioned are making this situation way worse, And I have very little respect for the NCAA because I think they completely dropped the ball on these various developments. And of course, I don't really have a lot of respect for the Big Ten at the moment either because of the raids they made. Whether this situation is reparable in any way that we as quality higher education institutions are going to appreciate is uncertain in my view. Yeah. I think that we're still way far from the end of this process, and it may not go well at all.
Yeah. Okay. 3 different faculty members from various schools and colleges wrote in broadly with this kind of question. They said, okay, we acknowledge that Notre Dame is committed to diversity and inclusion, but with a lot of work to do on those issues. When you look around the country, is there any place or any set of programs around the broad issues of diversity and inclusion that you think that's a model program? Because we know that there's a lot of work to do at Notre Dame, and we're looking for exemplars for how we can do it better.
There are a number of programs I can point to and institutions I can point to who are doing things really well. One is the Meyerhoff Scholars Program at UMBC,
Yep.
which has become a model adopted by the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and a few other places. It is very resource intensive, but it has produced really great results, and I think that is something to be emulated. I think it's really one way of doing it, and I think there have to be multiple strategies on a variety of different levels. In terms of trying to bring a diverse student population to your campus, you probably read about it because it was just in the news this weekend, and that's Johns Hopkins. Now, they had the incredible benefit of a $1.8 billion gift from alumnus Mike Bloomberg. We don't all have a Mike Bloomberg, who made it possible for them to not have to do financial aid with loans. But this institution is in the rare and fortunate position of being able to meet the full financial need of all of your students. And that is a huge and wonderful position to be in going forward. I also think we need to give attention to students while they're with us. So it's one thing to recruit a diverse student population, but it's another thing to help that diverse student population thrive. And so I don't want to give short shrift to the second part of that, because I think it is so important, and everybody in this room is a part of that undertaking. And I think one of the biggest challenges for all of our institutions is recruiting a more diverse faculty population, because I think for a lot of students, they want to see somebody like them standing in front of at least some of their classrooms. And I think that representation plays an important role.
When we did a couple student focus groups for the framework, it was striking how often that came up. I've been here 4 years. I've loved Notre Dame. I never saw anyone in the front of the classroom who looked like me. Peter?
I was going to say, I think that we're in a very, Barbara could speak to the examples. I can only speak to the process right now.
Yeah.
We're in a very unique period in which we have the court decision, but the court decision leaves a massive amount of space for figuring out what to do.
This is the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action this summer.
And our institutions are either going to be more or less willing to take risks to push the boundaries. And from my point of view, a commitment to diversity means pushing those boundaries, taking the risk that something you do, you may get sued, you may have to defend yourself, you'll defend yourself within the bounds that you felt the law allowed, but if you don't take those risks, we're going to have a serious backsliding in the diversity of our student bodies, not just with African American students, but it's going to become more widespread. And so I think that that's going to be a test for our university. It's going to be a test for Notre Dame on the faculty, and it'll roll over onto the faculty side. It's not going to be just about students. And are we as institutions going to be willing to push that boundary, or are we going to say, oh, I don't want to get sued, oh, it's too much trouble, we'll just be very careful, and what you'll find is your diversity is going to decline.
So this question is sort of amusing, because 3 people wrote in and they said, John, I want you personally to address this question. And it was, how do we sustain the Catholic mission of the university in the context of hiring Catholic faculty? The university has long time had a commitment to that, and how do we sustain that in an era of religious disaffiliation? I actually think it's a great question, and crucial for our ability to get that distinctive advantage that Peter referred to, where we have a particular mission, a particular Catholic mission. We've never said there was a quota. We've never said, 51% versus 49% makes a huge difference. But we have said we're committed to Catholic hiring because that is our distinctive mission and our comparative advantage. And the hope is that continues in a profound way over the next decade. Okay, lightning round. What is Notre Dame's biggest risk and biggest opportunity? You have one sentence on each. Biggest risk, biggest opportunity.
Okay, I have a one-word answer to the risk.
One-word answer on the risk, ladies and gentlemen.
You know what it is.
What?
You know what it is.
The answer is?
Complacency. Okay? You've got way more money than you used to have. You're in the AAU now. You're feeling great. Okay? And you got a strategic plan, and you're either going to push it or you're going to say, wow, we're doing great. Yeah. And I think Father Jenkins referred to it earlier. Yeah. If you just sit on where you are and bask in the incredible accomplishments you've had, you're actually going to go backwards. Yeah. So that's my answer on the risk.
Opportunity.
The opportunity is that blend of your broad Catholic values with the principles of strategic plan in hiring and everything to make yourself both distinguished and distinctive. Is that one sentence each? Yeah.
Barbara. Opportunity and risk.
So I think the biggest risk is not seizing the opportunity that's in front of you right now, because I think you are at an inflection point, having just come into the AAU, having accomplished a lot in terms of fundraising and building buildings. And when I look at what's been done over the last couple decades, it's impressive. There's no doubt about it. But not seizing that opportunity and going forward in a big way is another way of saying complacency. Yeah. It's a huge risk, and it's because you've been working so hard at this for so long, it would be so easy to say, oh, we're doing well, and not seizing this remarkable opportunity and recognizing that this is a moment. And inflection points come along very rarely. You have one in front of you right now. And I hope that everyone in this room and everyone who's not in this room sees that as both the biggest risk, not seizing it, and the greatest opportunity for Notre Dame. It is hard to be distinctive among these great research universities, but you have already done that, and you have a future that will allow you to continue to do that, and that aligns so well with, I think, shared values and values that matter to our country and our globe around the things we talked about, diversity, inclusion, around social justice, around poverty and the impact that that has on people, on health, and so many other things. So I think there's real opportunity to do something here, and then with the values that you have defining and helping you put a lot of enthusiasm behind the work that you do, I think you're in a position to really make a difference.
Thank you. Okay, before we go, and boy, didn't this go fast? I mean, it went quickly. Before we go, we have two thank yous. First, we need to thank someone who is entering his 19th year in a very demanding role. Throughout that time, he has led the university with vision, integrity, and a distinct sense of moral purpose. We very rarely do this because he never asks for it. But I hope you'll join me in a warm round of applause for Father Jenkins. Second, thank you. Please join me again in thanking two extraordinary panelists who took time out of their very busy schedules to join us for this conversation, Barbara Snyder and Peter Long. Ladies and gentlemen, let's let the conversation continue. The bar is open in the back of the auditorium. Look forward to more conversation out there. Thank you.